Blue rare. Blue rare steak is cooked for less than 2 minutes total. The outside is seared quickly at extremely high heat. The inside remains completely raw and cold. The internal temperature never exceeds 115 degrees Fahrenheit. It is called blue in France because the raw beef has a faint bluish tint before cooking. French butchers developed this style for customers who wanted maximum flavor from the meat itself without heat altering the protein structure. Most American steakhouses will cook it but won't recommend it. Ordering blue rare in a chain restaurant is a reliable way to make a server visibly uncomfortable. Rare. A rare steak reaches an internal temperature of 125 degrees Fahrenheit. The outside is seared and brown. The inside is red, soft, and warm but not hot. Most serious steak eaters consider rare the minimum acceptable doneness for a quality cut. The Maillard reaction, the chemical process that creates the brown crust, requires surface temperatures above 280 degrees. The crust and the raw interior exist simultaneously because heat moves slowly through dense muscle tissue. A properly rare steak is not undercooked. It is precisely cooked to a specific temperature that preserves moisture and texture that higher heat destroys permanently. Medium rare. Medium rare is the most ordered steak doneness in the world, and every professional chef will tell you it is correct. Internal temperature of 130 to 135 degrees Fahrenheit. The center is pink, warm, and slightly firm. The fat has begun to render, releasing flavor into the meat. The muscle fibers are relaxed enough to be tender, but not yet tightened by overcooking. When a steakhouse asks how you want your steak and you say medium rare, the kitchen takes you seriously. When you say well done, the kitchen sends out whichever steak has been sitting longest. This is not a secret. Medium. Medium steak reaches 140 to 145 degrees internally. The pink center is smaller and the meat is firmer throughout. For cuts with significant fat marbling like ribeye, medium can actually be preferable to medium rare because the extra heat renders more of the intramuscular fat, distributing flavor through the entire cut. This is why some experienced steak eaters order high-grade Wagyu at medium rather than medium rare. The rules about doneness are general guidelines. The exception is always the quality and cut of the specific piece of meat on the plate. Well done. Ordering a well-done steak in a fine dining restaurant is a statement. The chef will cook it. They will not be happy about it. Internal temperature above 160 degrees means all pink is gone. The juices have largely evaporated and the muscle fibers have contracted fully. The result is a drier, firmer piece of meat. Well done became associated with people who distrust undercooked food, which is a reasonable concern with ground beef, but largely unnecessary with whole muscle cuts. The debate between chefs and well-done customers has never been resolved and shows no signs of progress. Tartare. Tartare is completely raw beef, finely chopped or ground, mixed with capers, onions, mustard, Worcestershire sauce, and a raw egg yolk on top. It has been eaten in France since at least the 19th century. The name comes from a legend that Mongol warriors under Genghis Khan tenderized raw meat under their saddles while riding. Food historians consider this story almost certainly false. What is true is that steak tartare requires the freshest possible beef, handled under strict conditions. Every tartare you have eaten in a reputable restaurant was prepared safely. Everyone that made someone sick was not. Surf and turf. Surf and turf, steak paired with lobster or shrimp on the same plate, became an American restaurant staple in the 1960s when both beef and seafood were simultaneously expensive enough to signal luxury, but affordable enough for a special occasion dinner. The combination has no culinary logic. Steak and lobster do not enhance each other. The pairing is purely a status signal. Ordering surf and turf communicated that you could afford both and chose not to choose. It became the default anniversary dinner at American steakhouses and has remained there for 60 years entirely on the strength of that original message. Steak frites. Steak frites, steak with French fries, is the national dish of Belgium, despite being most associated with French bistro cooking. The combination became standardized in Parisian bistros in the late 19th century as a simple, affordable meal that working-class customers could eat quickly. A thin steak, usually hanger or skirt, cooked fast at high heat, served with a pile of fries and a simple sauce, béarnaise, peppercorn, or butter. The dish spread globally through French culinary influence and is now on menus from Buenos Aires to Tokyo. The simplest possible combination of protein and starch became one of the most replicated meals in the world. Southern fried chicken. Southern fried chicken emerged from two separate culinary traditions that combined in the American South during the 18th and 19th centuries. Scottish immigrants brought the technique of frying chicken in fat, while West African enslaved people contributed the practice of heavily seasoning and marinating the meat before cooking. Neither tradition alone produced the dish. The combination of Scottish frying method and African spicing created what became the foundation for nearly every fried chicken style that followed. The chicken is coated in seasoned flour and fried in a cast iron pan or deep fryer until the crust sets hard and golden. It became central to Southern family culture and Sunday meals throughout the 19th century and remains the base from which Korean, Japanese, and Nashville styles all developed. Buttermilk fried chicken is built around a single step that changes the texture of the meat entirely. The chicken soaks in buttermilk for anywhere between 2 hours and 24 hours before any flour touches it. Buttermilk is mildly acidic, and that acidity slowly breaks down the protein structures inside the muscle fibers, relaxing them and allowing the meat to hold more moisture during frying. The lactic acid also helps the flour coating grip the surface more firmly, producing a thicker and craggier crust with more texture than standard flour alone creates. The technique became widespread across American home cooking through the 20th century. Some recipes add hot sauce or pickle juice to the buttermilk soak for extra flavor and additional tenderizing. Chick-fil-A built its entire menu around this method, though the company has never confirmed the exact details of its recipe.
Nashville hot chicken. Nashville hot chicken was created in Nashville, Tennessee, and the most widely told version of its origin begins as an act of revenge. A woman made an extremely spiced chicken for her unfaithful partner, expecting the heat to punish him. He enjoyed it instead. The Prince family, who operate Prince's Hot Chicken Shack, are credited with developing and popularizing the style from the 1930s onward. The dish begins as standard fried chicken, then receives a paste made immediately after frying from cayenne pepper, brown sugar, and the hot frying oil itself. The residual oil activates the spice and drives the heat into the crust rather than sitting on top of it. It is served on white bread with pickle slices, which absorb the excess spiced oil. Nashville hot chicken remained a local specialty for decades before spreading nationally through the 2010s when fast food chains began releasing their own versions.
KFC did not invent fried chicken. He invented a system for cooking it quickly, consistently, and at scale, then franchised that system around the world. Sanders developed his recipe in Corbin, Kentucky in the 1930s at a roadside restaurant where he used a pressure fryer and a blend of seasoning he described as 11 herbs and spices. Pressure frying sealed moisture inside the meat while cutting cooking time from around 15 minutes to under 9. He began franchising the concept in the 1952 and by 1964 had sold the company with over 600 locations already running. KFC introduced fried chicken as a food category to countries where it had no prior tradition. In Japan, a 1974 marketing campaign positioned KFC as a Christmas meal, and the association became so strong that Japanese families now book KFC weeks in advance every December. The chain operates in over 150 countries.
Buffalo wings. Buffalo wings were created in 1964 at the Anchor Bar in Buffalo, New York, by Teresa Bellissimo. The most repeated version of the story is that the bar received a mistaken delivery of chicken wings instead of the chicken parts they had ordered, and Bellissimo deep-fried them and covered them in hot sauce rather than let them go to waste. She served them with blue cheese dressing and celery because those were the ingredients available. The wings were fried without any coating or breading, which is what separates buffalo wings from most other fried chicken styles. The sauce, a combination of hot sauce and melted butter, is applied after frying. For years, the dish remained a regional food found only around Buffalo and upstate New York. By the mid-1980s, it had spread nationally, and by the 1990s, buffalo wings were a standard item in bars and restaurants across the United States, Canada, and eventually Britain and Australia.
Korean fried chicken. Korean fried chicken developed directly from contact with American soldiers during the Korean War in the early 1950s. African American soldiers brought Southern frying techniques to South Korea, and local cooks absorbed the method and rebuilt the dish using Korean ingredients and a different frying approach. The defining technique is double frying. The chicken is fried once at a lower temperature to cook the meat through, then removed, rested briefly, and fried again at a higher temperature. The second fry drives remaining moisture out of the coating and creates a thin, glass-like crust that stays crisp for hours without softening. The finished pieces are tossed in sauce, either a sweet soy and garlic glaze or a fermented chili paste called gochujang. In South Korea, fried chicken is served alongside beer and is a standard item in bars nationwide. The combination is called chimek, a word combining the Korean words for chicken and beer.
Chick-fil-A Chicken Nuggets. Chick-fil-A is closed every Sunday. Every single Sunday. While every competitor stays open 7 days a week, Chick-fil-A deliberately loses millions every Sunday for religious reasons. The result? More revenue per restaurant than McDonald's. A restaurant closed 1 day a week beats every competitor that never closes. Their nuggets are made from whole breast meat, never formed or processed, marinated in a proprietary blend for 24 hours before pressure cooking. A chain that refuses to work 1 day a week produces the nugget that every other chain is trying to copy. The original sandwich has 3 ingredients: chicken, 2 pickles, and a buttered bun. Billions of dollars built on 2 pickles. Chick-fil-A figured this out before anyone else and has never changed it. Popeyes. In 2019, Popeyes released a chicken sandwich. Within 2 weeks, every location in America had sold out. One man in Maryland was stabbed in a fight over the last sandwich. A single fast food item caused a stabbing. McDonald's, Burger King, and Wendy's all panicked and rushed their own versions to market. The media called it the Chicken Sandwich Wars. All from a restaurant that failed completely in its first month and almost never reopened. Wendy's Spicy Nuggets. Wendy's introduced spicy chicken nuggets in 1983, making them one of the first fast food chains to offer a spicy nugget format. Then removed them from the menu in 2017. The internet responded with a level of sustained outrage that surprised even Wendy's own marketing team. A Twitter campaign demanding their return gained so much traction that Wendy's agreed to bring them back if a tweet received 2 million likes. It reached 2 million likes. Wendy's brought the spicy nuggets back in 2019. The campaign demonstrated that removing a beloved product creates more brand loyalty than keeping it would have generated. Wendy's accidentally discovered that threatening to take something away permanently is more powerful marketing than any advertisement they could have purchased. McDonald's Chicken McNuggets. McDonald's Chicken McNuggets were invented in 1979 by a food scientist named Roger Baker, who spent years trying to find a way to attach breading to chicken without it falling off. The solution was a batter system that locked the coating to the meat at the molecular level. McNuggets launched nationally in 1983, and within 1 year, McDonald's became the second largest chicken purchaser in the United States. The 4 shapes, bell, boot, ball, and bone, are not random. They were designed specifically to cook evenly from frozen because uniform thickness across different shapes ensures consistent internal temperature. A food scientist's molecular bonding solution changed how the world eats chicken forever. Every chicken nugget sold anywhere on Earth traces its existence back to Roger Baker's laboratory in 1979. KFC Original Recipe Strips. Harlan Sanders did not invent fried chicken. He invented a system for cooking it consistently at scale and franchised that system around the world. The original recipe contains 11 herbs and spices and has been kept in a physical vault at KFC headquarters in Louisville, Kentucky since 1940. Only 2 KFC executives know the complete recipe at any given time, and they are not permitted to travel together in case of accidents. The recipe has never been publicly confirmed, despite multiple alleged leaks over the decades.
KFC's chicken strips apply the original recipe coating to a boneless format that outsells the bone-in chicken in most markets globally. A secret recipe locked in a vault and protected like national security intelligence is the most effective marketing strategy in fast food history. Raising Cane's Chicken Fingers. Raising Cane's opened its first location in Baton Rouge, Louisiana in 1996 with a menu so simple it seemed like a mistake. Chicken fingers, crinkle-cut fries, coleslaw, Texas toast, one sauce. That is the entire menu. The founder, Todd Graves, was rejected by every business school he applied to and every bank he approached for a loan. He raised the startup capital by working on a fishing vessel in Alaska. Raising Cane's now operates over 800 locations and generates more revenue per location than almost every other fast food chain in America. The Cane's sauce has generated more obsessive fan speculation than almost any other condiment in fast food. A menu with essentially one item built a billion-dollar company. Medium well. Medium well steak is cooked to an internal temperature of 150 to 155 degrees Fahrenheit. A small amount of pink remains in the very center, but the rest of the meat is gray and firm. Professional chefs will cook it without complaint. They will not recommend it. The moisture content has dropped significantly from medium, which means the steak is noticeably drier and tougher than anything below it on the doneness scale. Medium well exists for people who want the reassurance of almost no pink without committing to the full disappointment of well done. It is the compromise that satisfies nobody completely. Pittsburgh style. Pittsburgh style steak is called black and blue. Charred completely black on the outside, cold and raw on the inside. The name comes from the steel mills of Pittsburgh, where workers allegedly threw pieces of meat directly onto the superheated steel to cook them during breaks. The steel surface reached temperatures high enough to carbonize the exterior in seconds, while the interior never had time to warm. The story may be partially mythologized. The technique is real. Achieving true Pittsburgh style requires a surface temperature above 700 degrees Fahrenheit. Most home grills cannot reach this temperature. The few that can produce a result that looks alarming and tastes extraordinary. Dry aged. Dry aging is controlled decomposition. The steak is stored uncovered in a refrigerated environment with precise humidity and airflow for anywhere between 21 and 120 days. Enzymes in the meat break down the muscle fibers, tenderizing the texture. Moisture evaporates, concentrating the flavor. A hard outer crust forms and must be trimmed away before cooking. The trimming means significant weight loss, which is why dry-aged beef costs 2 to 3 times more than fresh beef of the same grade. A 45-day dry-aged ribeye tastes fundamentally different from the same ribeye cooked fresh. The flavor is deeper, nuttier, and more complex. The process is essentially making beef more beef-flavored. Salt crust. Salt crust cooking encases the entire steak in a thick layer of coarse sea salt mixed with egg white before baking. The salt forms a hard shell that traps steam and heat inside, creating an environment that cooks the meat evenly at a controlled temperature. When the crust is cracked open at the table, the reveal is theatrical enough that restaurants charge significantly more for the experience than for a standard steak. The meat inside is not overly salty because the salt shell acts as insulation rather than a seasoning layer. Most of the salt stays in the crust. The drama is the point as much as the cooking method. Wagyu A5. Wagyu A5 is the highest grade of Japanese beef and the most expensive steak in the world available commercially. The A5 grading requires a beef marbling score of 8 to 12, meaning intramuscular fat is distributed so densely throughout the muscle that the meat appears almost entirely white. A single ounce of A5 Wagyu can cost more than $50. Because the fat content is so extreme, A5 is traditionally served in thin slicers rather than full steaks. Eating an entire American-sized portion would be physically overwhelming. The fat melts at body temperature, which means A5 Wagyu begins dissolving the moment it touches your tongue before you have fully bitten into it. Campfire steak.
Cooking steak directly over an open campfire produces results that no indoor cooking method can replicate, because wood smoke compounds penetrate the meat while the irregular heat of actual flames creates a crust no gas or electric surface can match. American camping culture has produced an entire tradition of campfire steak cooking, with cast iron skillets, grill grates placed over fire pits, and the most extreme version, the dirty steak method of placing the meat directly on the hot coals. Theodore Roosevelt reportedly preferred his steak cooked directly on campfire coals. Whether this story is accurate or not, Americans have been making steaks this way in national parks and backyards for over a century.
Butter basted. Butter basting is the technique that separates restaurant steaks from home steaks. The steak is seared in a screaming hot pan, then butter, garlic, and thyme are added, and the melted butter is continuously spooned over the surface of the meat for the final minutes of cooking. The butter browns from the residual heat, creating nutty flavors that penetrate the crust. Gordon Ramsay demonstrated butter basting on television, and millions of home cooks immediately tried to replicate it. Most produced a burnt mess on their first attempt. The technique looks simple and requires practice. Restaurant cooks do it hundreds of times before it becomes automatic.
Lemon pepper. Lemon pepper dry rub wings became the defining food of Atlanta, Georgia. The city's hip-hop culture adopted lemon pepper wings as a cultural staple in the 2000s, and multiple Atlanta rappers referenced them in songs. The dry rub format, no sauce, just seasoning pressed directly into the skin, creates a crunch that wet wings cannot replicate. Atlanta wing shops started offering lemon pepper wet, which adds butter to the dry rub after frying. The rest of America is still debating whether this is genius or an act of culinary chaos. Garlic Parmesan. Garlic Parmesan wings exist in the space between Italian cooking and American bar food. Roasted garlic, butter, and grated Parmesan pressed into crispy wings after frying. No heat, no sweetness, just fat and salt in their most effective combination. The flavor became mainstream in the 2000s when American casual dining chains needed a wing option for customers who wanted something other than buffalo. It is now one of the most ordered flavors at Wingstop globally, and the default choice for anyone who wants wings without actually committing to anything spicy.
Hot honey. Hot honey became the defining food trend of the mid-2020s, sweet and spicy simultaneously. A Brooklyn beekeeper started drizzling chili-infused honey on food in 2010 as a hobby. By 2025, it was on wing menus at every major chain in America. The combination works because honey amplifies heat instead of canceling it. Your brain registers sweetness first. The heat arrives afterward. By then, it is too late to stop eating. Food scientists describe it as one of the most addictive flavor profiles that exists.
Mango habanero. Mango habanero is the wing flavor that lies to you. It looks tropical and sweet. The mango color suggests something refreshing. Then the habanero arrives. A habanero pepper registers between 100,000 and 350,000 Scoville units. A jalapeno sits at 8,000. Wingstop made mango habanero one of their signature flavors, and it consistently ranks as both the most ordered and most complained about wing flavor they sell. People order it once out of curiosity, then they order it again because the combination of tropical sweetness and genuine heat is impossible to forget.
Korean gochujang. Korean fried chicken changed how the world thinks about wings. The double fry technique creates a crust so thin it shatters like glass. Gochujang, a fermented chili paste used in Korean cooking for centuries, provides heat with depth and complexity that American hot sauces cannot replicate. Korean wing restaurants started appearing in American cities in the 2010s, and the format spread globally within a decade. The combination of technique and sauce created something so different from buffalo wings that food critics stopped comparing them and started treating Korean wings as their own category entirely.
Nashville Hot. Nashville hot chicken was invented as an act of revenge that backfired. A woman made an extremely spiced chicken for her unfaithful partner, expecting the heat to punish him. He loved it. The Prince family developed this style from the 1930s onward. Applied to wings, the cayenne paste pressed into the hot skin after frying creates heat that builds with every bite rather than hitting immediately. Nashville hot wings remained a regional specialty for decades before national chains discovered them in the 2010s. The revenge dish that failed to punish anyone is now one of the most replicated flavors in American food. Hickory smoked BBQ. Hickory smoked BBQ wings require patience that most wing preparations do not. The hickory wood smoke penetrates the meat over hours before the wings ever see a fryer or oven. The result is a depth of flavor that sauce alone cannot create. True hickory smoke has been used in American BBQ since indigenous peoples of the Southeast first used it to preserve meat. The smokiness works on wings because the skin acts as a membrane that traps smoke compounds inside. Every BBQ chain has a smoked version. None of them taste exactly the same because hickory trees vary by region, and no two smoking setups produce identical results.
Teriyaki. Teriyaki sauce was invented in Japan using soy sauce, mirin, and sugar reduced together until glossy. The word teriyaki combines teri, meaning shine, and yaki, meaning grill. Japanese immigrants brought the technique to Hawaii in the early 20th century, where it merged with American BBQ culture. Hawaiian teriyaki is sweeter and thicker than the Japanese original. When teriyaki wings arrived in American restaurants in the 1980s and 1990s, they used the Hawaiian version, not the Japanese one. Most Americans eating teriyaki wings are eating a Hawaii interpretation of a Japanese technique filtered through mainland American fast food. Nobody minds.
Sweet chili. Sweet chili sauce originated in Thailand as a dipping sauce for fried foods. Thai immigrants and the global spread of Thai restaurants introduced it to Western markets in the 1980s and 1990s. The combination of sugar, vinegar, garlic, and mild chili creates heat low enough for almost anyone to handle, with sweetness forward enough to be immediately appealing. Sweet chili wings became one of the most popular flavors in British and Australian wing culture specifically because the heat level is approachable. In the Netherlands, it is consistently one of the top-ordered wing flavors at American-style restaurants. Cajun dry rub. Cajun seasoning comes from Louisiana, where French, African, and Native American cooking traditions merged over centuries into something that belongs entirely to that region. The dry rub format applies the spice blend directly to the skin before cooking, rather than adding sauce afterward. The result is heat that comes from inside the crust, rather than sitting on top of it. Cajun dry rub wings became popular nationally in the 2000s as American food culture developed a serious interest in regional Southern cooking. The flavor profile, paprika, cayenne, garlic, onion, and oregano, is now one of the most recognized spice combinations in American cooking.
Butter chicken wings. Butter chicken sauce on wings is a fusion that should not work as well as it does. The sauce, tomato, cream, butter, and spices slow-cooked together, was invented in Delhi in 1947 from leftover tandoori chicken. Applied to American-style fried wings, it creates something neither Indian nor American cooking ever produced independently. Indian fusion restaurants in the United States and Britain started serving butter chicken wings in the 2010s, and the format spread rapidly. The combination of crispy American wing technique and rich Indian sauce created a flavor profile that both cultures immediately recognized as their own. Beef. Beef comes from cattle first domesticated around 10,000 years ago in what is now Turkey. The word beef has nothing to do with cows in English. It comes from the French word bœuf, introduced after the Norman conquest of 1066, when French nobles ate the meat while Anglo-Saxon farmers raised he animals. That is why the animal on the farm is a cow, but the meat on the plate is beef. Pork. Pork is the most consumed meat in the world, accounting for roughly 36% of global meat intake. Pigs were domesticated in China and the Near East around 9,000 years ago, almost entirely for food from the beginning. Unlike cattle or sheep, pigs produce no milk, no wool, and cannot carry loads. China alone consumes more pork than the next 4 largest consuming countries combined. Chicken is the most consumed meat on the planet by volume, surpassing beef globally in the 1990s for the first time in history. Wild chickens were first domesticated in Southeast Asia around 8,000 years ago, initially for cockfighting rather than food. A commercial broiler in 1925 took 16 weeks to reach 1 kilogram. Today, the same bird reaches that weight in under 6 weeks due to selective breeding. Lamb is meat from a sheep under 1 year old. Meat from older sheep is called mutton and has a stronger flavor that fell out of fashion in Western markets during the 20th century. Sheep were among the first animals domesticated by humans 10,000 years ago in the Middle East. Australia is the world's largest exporter of lamb, shipping primarily to the Middle East and Asia. Duck contains significantly more myoglobin than chicken, making the flesh darker and richer even in the breast. Ducks were domesticated in China around 4,000 years ago. Peking duck has a recorded history going back to the 14th century Yuan dynasty. Traditional preparation involves inflating air between the skin and fat, coating the bird in a maltose glaze, and roasting in a wood-fired oven until the skin becomes lacquered and crisp.
Venison. Venison is deer meat. The word comes from the Latin venari, meaning to hunt. In medieval Europe, deer hunting was reserved for nobility and royalty. Poaching deer from royal forests was punishable by death. Wild venison is leaner than almost any other red meat because deer cover large distances foraging daily. Today, venison has grown steadily in popularity in the United States, New Zealand, and Scotland as consumers seek leaner alternatives to beef.
Wagyu. Wagyu means Japanese cattle. Due to Buddhist influence, beef consumption was prohibited in Japan for over 1,000 years. Japan's national isolation policy between 1635 and 1854 further separated Japanese cattle genetically from the rest of the world. This produced animals with an unusually high capacity for intramuscular fat. The highest grade Wagyu, rated A5, can sell for over $200 per 100 grams.
Turkey. Turkey is native to North America and was domesticated by indigenous peoples thousands of years before European contact. Spanish explorers brought it to Europe in the 16th century. In the United States, turkey became associated with Thanksgiving after it was mentioned in accounts of early colonial celebrations. Americans consume roughly 46 million turkeys on Thanksgiving alone each year. Turkey meat is leaner than chicken and slightly higher in protein per gram. Goat is the most widely consumed red meat in the world when measured globally, eaten across Africa, the Middle East, South Asia, and Latin America. It is leaner than beef or lamb, with a slightly stronger flavor that varies depending on the age of the animal. Younger goat, called kid, is mild and tender. Older goat has a more pronounced taste. Goat milk is also the most consumed dairy product globally, ahead of cow's milk.
Rabbit meat has been eaten across Europe, Asia, and the Americas for thousands of years. Romans farmed rabbits in enclosed gardens called lepararia as far back as the 1st century BCE. The meat is white, lean, and mild in flavor, often compared to chicken but slightly denser. France, Italy, and Spain remain the largest consumers of rabbit in Europe. In Australia and Britain, rabbit was a staple food during both world wars when other meats were rationed. Quail is one of the smallest birds eaten as meat, typically weighing between 100 and 200 grams. It has been hunted and eaten across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East for thousands of years. Ancient Egyptians kept quail in large numbers and ate them regularly, and they appear in hieroglyphic records. The meat is darker and richer than chicken, with a slightly gamey flavor. Quail eggs are considered a delicacy in Japan, France, and across Southeast Asia. Water buffalo were domesticated in South and Southeast Asia around 5,000 years ago and remain one of the most important livestock animals in the world. The meat is darker and slightly sweeter than beef, with lower cholesterol levels. In Italy, water buffalo milk is used to produce traditional mozzarella di bufala, which is legally distinct from cow's milk mozzarella and protected by European Union designation of origin laws. Water buffalo are also farmed for meat in Australia, where feral populations were established in the 19th century. Crocodile meat is eaten in Australia, Southeast Asia, and parts of Africa. The meat is white and firm with a flavor often described as a cross between chicken and fish. Australia farms saltwater and freshwater crocodiles commercially in the Northern Territory and Queensland, both for their skin and their meat. Crocodile meat is high in protein and low in fat. It became more widely available in Australian restaurants and specialty stores from the 1990s onward.
Kangaroo meat has been eaten by indigenous Australians for at least 50,000 years and is the oldest continuously consumed meat by any single culture on Earth. It is extremely lean, with less than 2% fat, and is one of the most environmentally sustainable meats available because kangaroos produce significantly less methane than cattle or sheep. A 2005 naming contest gave kangaroo meat the alternative name Australis, modeled on words like beef and pork, though the name never became widely used.
Pork belly is the boneless cut taken from the underside of the pig, made up of alternating layers of fat and meat. It is the same cut used to make bacon. The difference is that bacon is cured, smoked, and sliced, while pork belly is cooked whole. It became a staple of Korean barbecue, where thick slices called samgyeopsal are grilled at the table. In Chinese cuisine, red braised pork belly has been eaten for over 1,000 years. Pork belly became a restaurant trend across the United States, Britain, and Australia in the 2000s, as chefs embraced its fat content as a feature rather than a flaw. Frog legs have been eaten in China for over 2,000 years and in France since at least the 12th century. France is most closely associated with the dish internationally, though China and Southeast Asia consume far more frog legs annually. In the United States, frog legs are a regional specialty in Louisiana and the American South, where bullfrogs are harvested from swamps and bayous. The meat is white, mild, and often compared to chicken, though the texture is closer to fish. Indonesia is currently the world's largest exporter of frog legs, shipping primarily to France and Belgium. Bacon. Bacon is the most powerful food marketing tool ever created. Restaurants discovered in the 1980s that adding bacon to any item on the menu increased sales regardless of what the item was. Bacon milkshakes sold, bacon donuts sold, bacon on salad sold. The United States produces over 2 billion pounds of bacon per year and still imports more. Bacon was not always a breakfast food. A marketing campaign in the 1920s paid doctors to recommend hearty breakfasts and specifically mentioned bacon. One campaign over 100 years ago permanently changed what an entire country eats every morning.
Hot dog. The hot dog was invented at a baseball game and nobody agrees on which one. Multiple vendors at different ballparks in the 1890s claim credit. What everyone agrees on is that the name came from a cartoon. In 1906, a cartoonist drew a dachshund sausage in a bun at a New York Giants game and labeled it a hot dog. The drawing spread everywhere. The name stuck permanently. Americans eat 20 billion hot dogs per year. 7 billion of those are eaten between Memorial Day and Labor Day alone.
Pepperoni. Pepperoni is the most popular pizza topping in America, and it doesn't exist in Italy. Italian Americans invented it in New York in the early 1900s. If you order pepperoni pizza in Italy today, you will receive a pizza topped with bell peppers. Pepperoni means bell pepper in Italian. Americans took the word, changed the spelling, invented a completely new sausage, and put it on 36% of all pizzas sold in the United States every single year. Italy has never acknowledged this as their product. Salami. The white coating on salami is penicillin, the same compound used in antibiotics. You've been eating medicine on your charcuterie board this whole time. Salami requires 0 cooking and 0 refrigeration because fermentation preserves it naturally. Roman soldiers carried it on marches 2,000 years ago for exactly this reason. Italy has over 300 officially recognized varieties. Americans eat more salami than any country outside Europe, and most couldn't name a single type beyond the one on their pizza. Chorizo. There are 2 completely different foods both called chorizo, and they share almost nothing except the name. Spanish chorizo is cured, dried, and ready to eat straight from the package. Mexican chorizo is raw, loose ground meat that must be cooked before eating. Ordering one while expecting the other is a guaranteed disaster. Spanish chorizo gets its red color from smoked paprika. Mexican chorizo gets its red color from dried chili peppers. Same name, different continent, completely different food. Bratwursts. Germany takes bratwurst seriously enough to have legal regulations defining exactly what it can contain. The first written record appears in Nuremberg in 1313, making it over 700 years old. Nuremberg bratwursts can only be legally produced within the city walls of Nuremberg. Germans eat over 800 million bratwursts per year. At every German football match, bratwurst outsells every other food item combined. A sausage has more legal protection in Germany than most intellectual property. Prosciutto. Prosciutto requires exactly 2 ingredients, pork and salt, nothing else. The leg is rubbed with sea salt and hung to cure for anywhere between 12 and 36 months. No smoking, no cooking, no additional preservation, just salt, time, and controlled air. Parma prosciutto carries protected designation of origin status, meaning it can only be produced in one specific region of Italy. A single aged leg can cost over $500. The most expensive ones are aged longer than most people's relationships. Kielbasa. Kielbasa simply means sausage in Polish. Every sausage in Poland is technically a kielbasa. When Polish immigrants arrived in America in the late 1800s, they brought their sausage traditions with them. American supermarkets eventually started selling one specific smoked variety and labeled it kielbasa, renaming an entire cuisine after a single word. Poland has hundreds of regional varieties with protected status. Americans know exactly one of them and consider it the definitive version. Poland has been quietly offended by this for decades. Mortadella. Mortadella is the original bologna. The American bologna sandwich that millions of children grew up eating is a direct descendant of mortadella from the Italian city of Bologna. Italian mortadella contains pistachios and chunks of fat in smooth pink meat. American processors removed everything interesting and created a cheaper, blander version, then named it after the city. Bologna, Italy was so unhappy about this that authentic Italian mortadella now carries protected status under European law. The city's name became synonymous with cheap processed meat in America. Bologna has never forgiven this. Hot honey fried chicken. Scientists who study flavor addiction call the combination of sweet, salty, and spicy hitting simultaneously the bliss point. Hot honey hits all 3 at once. A Brooklyn beekeeper started drizzling chili honey on pizza in 2010 as a hobby. By 2025, it was the most requested flavor at fast food chains across America. Your brain registers sweet first, then the heat arrives. By then, it's too late to stop eating. Jamaican jerk chicken. The people who invented jerk chicken were running for their lives. The Maroons escaped slavery and hid in Jamaica's Blue Mountains. They cooked underground to hide the smoke and smell from colonizers hunting them. A Scotch bonnet pepper registers 350,000 Scoville units. A jalapeno sits at 8,000. Tourists eat jerk chicken on vacation thinking it will be manageable. Some have needed medical attention. A survival technique invented to hide from colonizers is now Jamaica's most powerful cultural export. Schnitzel. Austria invented it, Germany perfected it, Australia made it a religion. Australians took schnitzel, covered it in tomato sauce and melted cheese, called it a parma, and built an entire pub culture around it. There are websites dedicated exclusively to rating chicken schnitzels at Australian pubs. Italians have no idea what a parma is. Australians argue about authentic parma with the intensity Italians argue about pasta. The Italians invented neither version of this argument. Japanese karaage. Japan studied American fried chicken and concluded America was doing it wrong. Too thick, too large, wrong starch. Karaage uses small pieces marinated in soy, ginger, and sake, coated in potato starch that fries into a shell so thin it barely exists. Japan then created a formal government body to regulate it. The Karaage Association of Japan holds annual competitions and issues official certifications. America invented the category. Japan formed an agency to regulate quality standards for it. Chicken and waffles. Nobody agrees on where this combination came from. Wells Supper Club in Harlem claims it started there in the 1930s when jazz musicians finishing late-night sets wanted both breakfast and dinner simultaneously. Others trace it to Pennsylvania Dutch cooking centuries earlier. The combination makes no logical sense to anyone who hasn't tried it. Sweet waffle, savory, crispy chicken, maple syrup over everything. It works because it shouldn't.
Today, chicken and waffles appears on menus from fast food chains to Michelin-starred restaurants. A dish that confused everyone became one of the most imitated comfort foods in America.
Popcorn chicken. KFC invented popcorn chicken in 1992 and accidentally created a new food category. The concept was simple. Take all the irregular pieces left over from cutting chicken into standard portions, batter them, and fry them small enough to eat by the handful. What started as a way to use leftover scraps became one of the most copied items in fast food history. Every major chain released their own version within years. The pieces are so small they cook faster, absorb more coating per bite, and cool down slower than regular fried chicken. Scientists who study snacking behavior say bite-sized food is harder to stop eating because each piece feels like a small commitment. KFC understood this in 1992. The rest of the industry caught up eventually.
Barbecue sauce. Kansas City barbecue sauce did not exist before the 20th century. Pitmasters smoked meat for hours and served it without sauce because the smoke was the flavor. Commercial barbecue sauce appeared in the 1940s when food companies realized they could bottle the finishing glaze that backyard cooks were applying. Kansas City style became the national standard because it photographed well and tasted universally appealing. Thick, sweet tomato-based, with molasses giving it a dark color and sticky texture. There are now over 100 commercial barbecue sauce brands in America. Every single one claims to be the original. None of them are. Chimichurri. Chimichurri requires no cooking. Fresh parsley, oregano, garlic, red wine vinegar, olive oil, and red pepper flakes. Everything goes in raw. The acid does the work. Nobody knows exactly where the name comes from. One theory credits Basque immigrants in Argentina. Another credits British soldiers mispronouncing a Spanish phrase. Food historians have not settled it. What is settled is that chimichurri became the national condiment of Argentina and Uruguay simultaneously, appearing on every table at every parrilla without being ordered. It simply arrives. A sauce with an unknown origin and a disputed name became the defining condiment of an entire continent's meat culture.
Béarnaise. Béarnaise was invented in 1837 at a restaurant called Le Pavillon Henry IV outside Paris. The chef, Colonnet, accidentally over-reduced a tarragon sauce and added egg yolks to save it. The result was named after the Béarn region of France, the birthplace of King Henry IV. The sauce is egg yolks emulsified with clarified butter, finished with tarragon, shallots, and white wine vinegar reduction. It breaks at the wrong temperature and cannot be fixed once it separates. Professional chefs consider it the hardest classical French sauce to execute consistently. A kitchen accident in 1837 became the most technically demanding sauce in Western cooking.
Peppercorn sauce. Peppercorn sauce was developed in French bistro cooking in the 1960s when green peppercorns, previously used only as a pickling spice, began appearing in French markets. A chef, name unrecorded, deglazed a pan with cognac, added green peppercorns and cream, and produced something that changed steakhouse menus globally within a decade. The cognac flambé sap burns off the alcohol while leaving the flavor. The green peppercorns provide heat without the sharpness of black pepper. The cream rounds everything into something that coats without overwhelming. French bistros invented it, American steakhouses popularized it. Every chain restaurant has a version that is worse than both.
Buffalo sauce. Buffalo sauce was invented on October 30th, 1964 at the Anchor Bar in Buffalo, New York. Teresa Bellissimo combined Frank's Red Hot sauce with melted butter in a ratio of approximately 2:1 and tossed chicken wings in it. The recipe has 2 ingredients. Frank's Red Hot is made from aged cayenne peppers, vinegar, garlic, and salt. The butter cuts the acidity and adds richness. Teresa never patented the recipe. Anyone can make it. Everyone did. Frank's Red Hot sales increased so dramatically after the buffalo wing went national that the company credits Teresa Bellissimo with saving their business. A 2-ingredient sauce invented in one night became a $1 billion condiment category.
Teriyaki. Teriyaki is a cooking technique, not a sauce. The word combines teri, meaning luster, and yaki, meaning grill. The glaze, soy sauce, mirin, and sake, reduced until glossy, is applied during cooking to create a lacquered surface that caramelizes under heat.
Japanese cooks developed it in the 17th century. American teriyaki sauce, thicker, sweeter, and often containing cornstarch and brown sugar, was adapted by Japanese-American restaurants in Hawaii and the Pacific Northwest in the 1960s to suit Western palates. Kikkoman began selling bottled teriyaki sauce in the 1970s. The American version now outsells the Japanese original in global markets. Japan developed the technique, America bottled it and sold it back.
Red wine jus. Red wine jus is what happens when a French chef refuses to waste anything, roasting bones, adding aromatics, deglazing with an entire bottle of red wine, and reducing for hours until the liquid becomes glossy and intensely concentrated. The result is not a sauce in the traditional sense. It is an extraction. Every atom of flavor from the bones, the wine, and the vegetables compressed into a few tablespoons of liquid. Bordelaise, the classic version from Bordeaux, adds bone marrow at the end. The marrow melts into the reduction and adds a richness that no other ingredient can replicate. French restaurants charge for this accordingly. The time investment alone justifies the price.
Garlic butter sauce. Compound butter is one of the oldest sauce formats in French cooking. Butter mixed with aromatics, rolled in plastic wrap, chilled, and sliced into discs placed on hot food to melt. Garlic butter became the American version of this technique when Italian-American restaurants began serving it with bread in the 1950s. The combination of fat, garlic, and heat produces allicin compounds that are responsible for one of the most universally recognized food smells in the world. Research shows that the smell of garlic butter cooking is one of the few aromas that triggers hunger responses in people who are not hungry. A simple French technique became the most effective appetite stimulant in the restaurant industry.
Mushroom sauce. Mushroom cream sauce traces to French cuisine, where duxelles, finely chopped mushrooms cooked down until almost dry, formed the base of dozens of classical preparations. The cream version, sautéed mushrooms deglazed with white wine and finished with heavy cream and thyme, became a steakhouse standard in America in the mid-20th century. Mushrooms contain glutamates, the compounds responsible for umami, in concentrations comparable to aged Parmesan and cured meat. This is why mushroom sauce satisfies people who believe they cannot enjoy a meal without meat. The sauce does not pretend to replace anything. It simply delivers the same flavor signals through fungi.
Blue cheese sauce. Blue cheese sauce is built on mold. The distinctive flavor and blue-green veining of Roquefort, Gorgonzola, and Stilton comes from penicillium mold introduced during aging. The mold produces enzymes that break down fats and proteins into intensely flavored compounds that no other cheese can replicate. Roquefort has been produced in the caves of Cambalu in southern France since at least the 11th century. The European Union protects it with designation of origin status. American blue cheese sauce, crumbled blue cheese mixed with sour cream, mayonnaise, and buttermilk, became the original dipping sauce for buffalo wings in 1964. Buffalo, New York still considers blue cheese the only acceptable accompaniment. They are correct.
Honey mustard. Romans mixed honey and mustard seeds centuries before either had a commercial market. Medieval European monks produced mustard commercially and sold it as medicine as much as food. The modern American honey mustard, equal parts honey and Dijon or yellow mustard, became the defining dipping sauce of fast food chicken in the 1980s when chains needed something that appealed to customers who found plain mustard too sharp and plain ketchup too childish. McDonald's introduced it as a McNugget sauce in 1983. It immediately became the most requested dipping sauce in the chain's history. A Roman condiment combination that medieval monks sold as medicine became the most requested fast food dipping sauce in American history.
Alabama white barbecue sauce. Alabama white sauce was invented in 1925 by Robert Gibson at Big Bob Gibson Barbecue in Decatur, Alabama. It contains mayonnaise, apple cider vinegar, horseradish, black pepper, and lemon juice. No tomato, no sugar, no smoke. Everything that defines standard American barbecue sauce is absent. Gibson developed it specifically for smoked chicken, where the acidity of the vinegar cuts through the fat and the mayonnaise base clings to the skin. The sauce remained almost entirely unknown outside northern Alabama for 80 years. Food writers discovered it in the 2000s and declared it the most underrated regional sauce in America. A 1925 Alabama invention finally went national a century after it was created.
Frozen steak. Cooking a steak directly from frozen is not a mistake, it is a technique. Food scientist J. Kenji Lopez Alt demonstrated that frozen steaks develop better crusts than thawed steaks because the frozen interior stays cold longer while the exterior sears, creating a wider window before the center overcooks. The actual mistake is cooking a partially frozen steak, where the exterior is thawed and soft, but the center is still ice. The surface temperature drops the pan temperature dramatically, the crust never forms properly, and the interior cooks unevenly. Fully frozen works, fully thawed works. The gray zone in between produces the gray steak that ends up in a bin.
Sous vide without searing. Sous vide produces the most perfectly cooked steak interior achievable by any method. A steak held at exactly 130 degrees for 2 hours has a completely uniform pink center from edge to edge with 0 gray band. Then someone skips the sear. The result is a perfectly cooked piece of beige protein with the visual appeal of boiled meat and none of the Maillard crust that makes steak worth eating. The steak is technically correct and practically unfinished. The sear is not cosmetic, it is the entire flavor development of the exterior. Sous vide without searing is cooking 90% of the process and stopping before the part that anyone can taste. Butter aged raw. Butter aging involves encasing a steak entirely in salted butter and refrigerating it for days or weeks. The fat in the butter penetrates the surface, the salt draws moisture and reabsorbs it with the butter flavor, and the controlled environment mimics some of the enzymatic activity of traditional dry aging without the open air exposure. It works. Done correctly, it produces a richer, more complex crust than unaged beef. The mistake is serving it without cooking, because butter aging is preparation, not cooking. Raw butter-aged steak is steak-flavored butter at refrigerator temperature. The technique is legitimate. The omission of heat is inexplicable. Over-spiced. Salt draws moisture from the surface of a steak through osmosis and then reabsorbs it within 30 to 45 minutes, which is why seasoning well in advance or immediately before cooking are both correct, and anything in between is wrong. Applying a heavy spice rub to a steak 10 minutes before cooking pulls moisture to the surface without time for reabsorption, creating a wet exterior that steams rather than sears when it hits the pan. The crust never forms. The spices burn before the meat browns. A steak over-seasoned at the wrong time does not taste over-seasoned. It tastes like a wet, pale, slightly bitter piece of meat that had the right ingredients applied incorrectly. Perfectly charred. The Pittsburgh-style steak, black and blue, charred completely on the exterior and cold and raw inside, requires a surface temperature above 700 degrees Fahrenheit to achieve correctly. The carbon layer that forms at extreme heat produces bitter compounds that read as flavor intensity rather than bitterness when the interior is still cold and barely seasoned. It is not a mistake, it is a controlled extreme. The mistake is attempting Pittsburgh style on a home gas grill that reaches 450 degrees at best, producing a steak that is burnt rather than charred, bitter throughout rather than bitter on the surface, and gray inside rather than cold and red. Pittsburgh style requires Pittsburgh temperatures. Ideal medium rare. Medium rare is the most ordered steak doneness in the world, and every professional chef will tell you it is correct. Internal temperature of 130 to 135 degrees Fahrenheit. The center is pink, warm, and slightly firm. The fat has begun to render, releasing flavor into the meat. The muscle fibers are relaxed enough to be tender, but not yet tightened by overcooking. When a steakhouse asks how you want your steak and you say medium rare, the kitchen takes you seriously. When you say well done, the kitchen sends out whichever steak has been sitting longest. This is not a secret.
Baby back ribs. Baby back ribs have nothing to do with babies. The name comes from the fact that these ribs are shorter than spare ribs and sit higher up on the pig's back, closer to the spine. They are the most ordered rib cut at American restaurants by a significant margin. Chili's built an entire brand identity around baby back ribs in 1994, with a jingle so effective that people still sing it 30 years later unprompted. The ribs themselves take 3 to 4 hours to cook properly. The jingle took less than 30 seconds to become permanently embedded in the American brain.
Pork belly burnt ends. Burnt ends were originally the scraps. When pitmasters in Kansas City finished smoking a brisket, the pointed end was darker, crispier, and considered less presentable than the flat. They gave them away free at the counter or sold them cheap. Food writer Calvin Trillin wrote about them in 1972 and called them the best part of the brisket. Demand reversed overnight. Pitmasters started charging more for burnt ends than for regular brisket slices. Pork belly burnt ends appeared later as a variation, cubing pork belly and smoking it until the exterior caramelizes into candy-like pieces.
The scraps became the premium item.
Pulled pork. Pulled pork is cooked so slowly and at such low temperature that the collagen in the muscle tissue dissolves completely and the meat falls apart on contact. A pork shoulder or butt is smoked for anywhere between 10 and 18 hours at around 225 degrees Fahrenheit. The internal temperature must reach 203 degrees before the meat will pull correctly. Carolina BBQ is built almost entirely around pulled pork. North Carolina uses a vinegar-based sauce. South Carolina uses mustard. Both states consider the other sauce a personal insult. This argument has been ongoing since the 18th century and will not be resolved.
Honey glazed ham. Ham became the default American Easter and Christmas meal entirely by accident. Before refrigeration, pigs were slaughtered in fall and the meat was cured through winter. By spring, the ham was finally ready to eat. Easter simply became the occasion when the cured ham was opened. The honey glaze, brown sugar, mustard, and pineapple rings baked onto the surface, was added in the 20th century as American cooking became more theatrical. Today, Americans spend over $700 million on Easter ham alone. A logistics problem from before refrigeration became a national holiday tradition that nobody has questioned since.
Pork chop with applesauce. The combination of pork and apples is one of the oldest flavor pairings in European cooking. Medieval cooks discovered that the acidity of apples cut through the fat of pork and balanced the flavor in a way that no other fruit could. German immigrants brought pork and applesauce to the United States in the 17th and 18th centuries, where it became embedded in American home cooking. The pork chop itself became a symbol of middle-class American dinner culture in the 1950s and 1960s. Pork chops with applesauce appeared on the Brady Bunch in 1970 and became so associated with the scene that the phrase entered American pop culture permanently.
Carnitas tacas. Carnitas means little meats in Spanish. Pork shoulder is braised in lard or oil with orange juice, garlic, and spices until tender, then shredded and crisped in the same fat until the exterior caramelizes. The technique originated in the state of Michoacán in Mexico, where it has been made the same way for centuries. Carnitas arrived in the United States through Mexican immigration and became mainstream through Chipotle, which lists carnitas as one of its most popular protein options. The traditional method requires hours of slow cooking in large copper pots over open flame. Chipotle makes it in industrial braziers. Both versions are called carnitas.
Lechon. Lechon is a whole roasted pig cooked over an open fire for hours until the skin becomes shatteringly crispy and the meat inside falls from the bone. It is the national dish of the Philippines and a centerpiece of celebrations across Latin America and the Caribbean. In Puerto Rico, lechon is so important that the town of Guavate has an entire highway known as the Lechon Highway, lined with restaurants serving nothing but whole roasted pig. Filipino communities in the United States recreate lechon at every major celebration. The logistics of roasting a whole pig over an open fire in a suburban American backyard have never discouraged anyone from attempting it.
Porchetta. Porchetta is a whole deboned pig stuffed with herbs, garlic, and fennel, rolled tightly and slow roasted until the exterior skin becomes a crackling shell surrounding layers of herb-perfumed meat and fat. It originated in central Italy and has been sold from roadside trucks at Italian markets and festivals for centuries. Italian immigrants brought porchetta to the United States, where it became popular at Italian-American festivals and eventually crossed into mainstream restaurant culture in the 2000s. The porchetta sandwich, thick slices of herb-stuffed pork on crusty bread with the crackling skin intact, is now one of the most sought-after street food items at American food markets.